Our next speaker is Annick Howland Kruse, who was adopted from Kazakhstan when she was 10 months old, never knowing who her birth parents were or why they left her. But even with this rough beginning, she thrived in school, making the honor roll every year, becoming president of her class, and winning a spot on her competitive Model Congress team. She started writing when she was 9, and became interested in spoken word poetry by 10. Ever since she has been writing down anything and everything to share with the world. Today she's going to share her spoken word about the stigma of depression, an issue very close to her heart. Anna's also going to share a poem to her birth mother.
Okay, so I'm a very indecisive person, and that's always just been like a part of who I am. So I originally, when Joy asked me to do this, I originally wrote a poem to my birth mother because I'd been watching TED Talks, and spoken word poetry was something that wasn't really common in them. It was something that people did do, but it wasn't something that was a reoccurring theme, and I thought that that was something that needed to be changed. So I wrote a poem for my birth mother, and then Julia told me that it had to be 15 minutes, and mine was 4, so I kind of reworked myself into talking about something that's really close to my heart, and that's the stigma of depression in society. So I think Nick was talking about, at his end, about suicide and drug prevention, and I think that that was like the perfect segue onto my topic, because this is something that I'm very open about with anybody in my life. It's something that's affected me personally, it's affected my family, it's just something that makes up who I am as a person, and I think that it's also a topic that just needs to be addressed, like, constantly. So for a long time in my life, I felt like I've been living 2 different lives. There was the life that everybody saw, and then there was a life that only I saw. And in the life that everybody else saw, I was a dreamer, I was a fighter, I was smart, I was a friend, I was a sister, I was a daughter, and that was a big part of who I was as a person. And if you asked any of my friends or family, that's what they would say to you. And if you asked me, I would say the same things. And I wouldn't be lying necessarily, but I wouldn't be saying the whole truth. Because the truth is that I am somebody who struggles with depression. I've struggled with depression for a very long time, and it's been a very rough part of my life. For someone who hasn't experienced depression, this could be kind of confusing, and they don't really understand what that means. It might surprise them, because there's a pretty clear misconception that depression is just being sad when something in your life goes wrong. When you lose a family member, when you get bad grades, when you don't get the job you wanted, when you break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend. But that's sadness. That's a natural human emotion that you feel when things go wrong. Depression is something that you feel when everything is going right. So to be totally honest, this is kind of hard for me to stand up here in front of all of you and say, because my family's in the audience and I didn't actually practice them in front of them, so they don't really know what I'm going to say. But as hard as it is for me to talk about, I believe that it is something that needs to be addressed and talked about all over the world, because nobody's talking about it. You don't see it openly on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. People don't post statuses saying, oh, I can't get out of bed, I'm really struggling with depression right now. They'd rather say something like, oh, my back hurts, like I can't, get out of bed and go on with my life. It's not in our newspapers, magazines, it's not relative, it's not fun, it's not light, and it's something that nobody talks about nowadays. And because we don't see it, we don't see the severity of it. But the severity of it is this. Every 30 seconds, someone somewhere kills themselves because of depression. Every 30 seconds. It could be 2 blocks away, it could be 2 houses away, it could be 2 continents away, 2 states away, it could be somewhere where you've never met that person, you've never seen that person, you don't even know that person's name, but they have killed themselves because of depression. And that is an absolutely terrible thing. So it's uncomfortable, and it makes us all uncomfortable to talk about, because it's something that's real, and it's something that's happening everywhere in the world, and it's something we have not done anything about. And it's hard for people to talk about. Because you say you're sorry and you say that it's so terrible that this has happened, but it's not your problem. It's not your brother who killed themselves. It's not your mother who killed themselves. So it's not your immediate problem. So when somebody kills themselves, we give them apologies. We say simple things like, oh, we're so sorry for your loss. How can we help? But it's not our problem. But 2 years ago, it was my problem. I sat in my bathroom, in my shower, in my clothes, sitting there, and I wanted to die. If you looked at my life on the outside, you would see a really smart kid who, like Julia said, was president of her class, made the Model Congress teams, made the UN teams, was going out to Yale and Penn State to go do totally amazing conferences and meeting amazing people. I was popular, I had so many friends, I was invited to every party that there was. I was the girl that you went to if you needed somebody to talk to. I was that person who you invited to a party to make the party fun. But on the inside, I wanted to die. Sorry. Everybody always told me that I had the world at my fingertips. They told me that I could do whatever I wanted, that I could rule the world. But it didn't feel like that inside. So at a glance, you wouldn't say I was depressed. You wouldn't say I was suicidal. But that night, I started writing letters. Sorry. I wrote 3 letters. I wrote a letter to my mom, telling her that I loved her and that she meant so much to me, that I was sorry, and that I wanted her to move on and help my brother. I wrote a letter to my dad, telling him that I was sorry for everything I had been through, telling him that I loved him more than words could ever say, that I wanted him to keep going, to help my brother get through all the rough times that it was about to be ahead of him, and to try and understand that there was nothing he could have done to prevent this. Finally, I wrote a letter to my little brother, who, even though we argued no matter what, we would constantly fight, we'd poke fun at each other, we'd hit each other. I think this was the hardest letter for me to write. I had to stop in the middle of this letter and think about if this was what I really wanted. Because the thought of leaving my little brother in a world where people don't address this topic, where kids who are 10 years old, 12 years old, 50 years old are killing themselves every day because they can't go on with life, I wasn't sure if this was the life that I wanted my brother to live. So I wrote my brother a letter. I told him that I loved him and that he could be extraordinary. He could do whatever he wanted in this world if he only believed in himself the way that I believed in him. I tried to ease his pain through words on a piece of paper, telling him that everything could be okay if he only believed in what he could do himself, and he didn't let what other people said or what other people thought bring him down. It was extremely difficult for me to seal that letter in that envelope, to know that that was what I was leaving my brother with, that I was leaving my mom with, that I was leaving my dad with, that if I killed myself, if I ended my life right there, that's all they would have of me in that last moment. Sure, they would have pictures, they would have videos, they would have letters that I've written, poems that I've written, but that was my last moment that they would have with me, is reading those letters and blaming themselves. I clearly did not go through with it, and I still have those letters. They're sealed up. Actually, I have no idea where they are, but they're somewhere hidden. And when I go home tonight, I'm gonna burn those letters. Because that's a part of me that I'm leaving in the past. And as hard as it was for me, that's something that I don't ever want to repeat again. That night was one of the worst nights of my life. I wanted to die. I wanted to I didn't want to be here anymore. And I left my parents and my brother with words, and I realized that that's not something I ever wanted them to see. So those letters are going to die with a part of me that died on that night. Sorry. I didn't go through with it. And that makes me one of the lucky ones. One of the people that survived, that stepped onto the bridge and didn't jump. That just leaves me with my story. And in 4 simple words, my story is this. I suffer from depression. And for a long time, I think I was living 2 totally different lives. The one where one person was always afraid of the other. I was afraid that people would see who I really was, and I thought that if they saw that I wasn't this perfect, popular, smart girl, they wouldn't like me. They wouldn't talk to me, they wouldn't invite me to parties, they wouldn't want me around them, because they would think that I would affect how they saw life. And that was a struggle for me. Because I was constantly scared that the darkest parts of myself would come out in public, and that the darkest parts of myself would control how other people saw me. Oof, sorry. See, some people might fear their crush not liking them back. Some people might fear heights. Some people might fear dying. But to this day, my biggest fear is myself. And that is extremely hard for me to admit. Because I tell people my biggest fear is spiders, or my biggest fear is heights, or I'm scared of the dark, or I'm scared of being left alone. But my biggest fear is myself. I felt like I was forced into a corner during that time, and there was only one way out. And that one way, I thought about it every single day. And if I'm being totally honest, I've thought about it since. It's the sickness that drives you to do such things. It's the depression. And depression is not chicken pox. It's not something you can beat once and it's gone forever. It's something you have to live with and you have to live in. It's like the roommate you can't kick out. It's the feelings you can't seem to escape. But the scariest part is that after a while you become numb to it. It becomes totally normal for you to suffer. It becomes completely ordinary for you. This is your daily routine. This is what makes you you. And you believe that this is a part of who you are. But it's not. What I feared during this time was what other people would think of me. So it took me a really, really long time to get help. It took me a very long time to tell people that this is what I was struggling with. I didn't want the disapproving looks in the hallways. I didn't want people whispering about me. I didn't want people to stop talking to me because they thought that this was something that would affect them. I didn't tell anybody because of the stigma that's around this. That makes me think like I'm crazy. That makes me think that I'm weak. So I held it in and I hid it. And even though it was keeping me in bed every single day, I have to hide it. Because the stigma in our society around depression is very, very real. And it's something that everybody suffers with. Whether it's a small part of depression, whether it's a big part of depression, you suffer from depression your entire life. And it took me a while to understand that this was just a part of life. This wasn't an insecurity. This wasn't a flaw. This is something that was a part of everybody's daily life. We live in a world where if you break your arm, everybody goes and runs to sign your cast. Where if you get a cut or a bruise, people try to patch it up because that's what we understand. We understand physical wounds, we understand fixing those, and we understand how to help you if you have them. But if you say you're depressed, everybody runs the other way. And that's what it's like to know that you are in this society where the stigma of depression keeps you in bed every day. We are so accepting of broken body parts. We are so accepting of bruises, of tumors, of cuts and bruises, but our brains, we don't accept that there's a real issue there. And that's ignorance. That's just pure ignorance. And that ignorance has created a world that doesn't understand depression, that doesn't understand mental health. And that's ironic to me because depression is one of the most documented problems we have in the world. And yet, it's one of the least discussed. We push it aside in a corner and hope it's not there, pretend it'll fix itself, but it won't. And it's not going to, and it hasn't. Because that's wishful thinking, and if wishful thinking is a game plan, it's procrastination. It's that homework assignment you leave until the last minute to do, and you don't get an A on because you left it till the last minute, which, i.e., is a bad idea. The first step in solving any problem is realizing that you have one. That goes with addiction, that goes with depression, that goes with anxiety, that goes with anything. We can't expect to find an answer if we don't even ask the question. And I don't know what the solution is. I wish I did, honestly, because it would make the world such a better place, but I don't know what the answer is. I think it has to start here. It has to start with me, and it has to start with you. It has to start with the people who are suffering, the ones who are hidden in the shadows. We need to speak up and shatter the silence. We need to be the ones who are brave for what we believe in. We need to be the ones that see that this is a big problem. See, if there's something that I've come to realize, if there's one thing I see as the biggest problem, it's not in building a world where we eliminate the ignorance of others. It's in building a world where we teach the acceptance of ourselves. It's where we're okay with who we are, because when we get honest, when we see that we all struggle and that we all suffer, we all know what it's like to have pain in our heart, to know that it's important to heal, whether that be a physical wound or a mental wound, whether it's just a loved one dying or it's something you struggle with every day. That wound needs to heal, and it might take years and it might take days, but eventually the wound needs to heal. So depression is like a deep cut that you decide to put a Band-Aid over, hoping that it'll get better, ignoring that it's there, hoping that it'll just heal itself. But it's there. The deep cut, it's there. It's going to stay there until you decide to go get stitches and get help. But the scar will always be there. We need to teach people that depression is okay. If you're going through it, know that you're okay and that you're not sick. You're weak. You're not weak, and it is an issue. Oh, sorry. It's an issue and not an identity. It's something that everybody understands. And even, as I said before, if it's something that's tiny in your life or something that takes up a big part of you, it's something that we all understand. When you get past the fear and the ridicule and the judgment, you'll just see that depression is a part of life. And as much as I hate some of the places I've been to, they make me who I am today. That night that I sat in the shower wanting to die, that makes me who I am today. That changed my perspective on the world. That changed my perspective on people. And that is a huge part of who I am. It dragged me to the lowest of the lows, but it also showed me that there are high peaks, that there are mountains that you can get to if you only try. So my pain, more than anything in 16 years on this planet, has showed me that my hurt will make me a stronger person. That my hurt will give me hope and faith that I will be able to be a better person than I was when I was sitting in that shower wanting to die. We need to speak up and we need to fight out against this. More than anything, we need to fight against the tolerance, and we need to learn to love ourselves, learn to accept ourselves for who we are, the people we are, not the people everybody else wants us to be. We're people, and we struggle, we cry, we suffer, we bleed. And if you think that true strength means never showing any weakness, then I'm here to tell you you're wrong. You're wrong because it's the opposite. We're people, and we have problems. We're not perfect, and that is okay. So we need to stop the ignorance, we need to stop the stigma, we need to stop the silence, we need to take away the taboos and look at the truth. We need to start talking, because that's the only way to solve this issue, is by standing strong and standing strong together. And I believe that we can. I believe that we can stop the stigma, stop the judgment, stop the taboos, stop the all the rumors going around about it if we work together and we stand together.